to today's session, we have amongst us our first speaker, Dr. Rajarshi Chakraborty. Dr. Rajarshi Chakraborty did his graduation from Presidency University. At that time, it was Presidency College, Kolkata, and he did his master's from University of Calcutta. He did his PhD on urbanization from University of Kalyani. Dr. Chakraborty has taught in Krishnanath College, Baharampur, and Sidhu Kanu Birsa University, Purulia. He is presently teaching in the University of Burdwan. He has worked on 2 UGC-sponsored projects as co-principal investigator in a UPA project from 2008 to 2014, and as a principal investigator in a minor research project 2011-12. He received his B.B. Chaudhuri Prize from Indian History Congress in 2011. He has presented papers and acted as resource person in various national and international seminars and conferences. His research interest areas are urbanization, gender, partition, and leprosy. He was a governing body member of Krishnanath College and Kandiraj College. He is also a member of various academic associations and presently the president of Murshidabad Zila Itihash or Sanskriti Charcha Kendra, and he is also an EC member of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. He has edited and acted as joint editor of 3 research publications, namely 1857 Phire Dekha, published by Shilpanagari Baharampur, secondly Purulia Charcha Volume 1, published by Art Collection Purulia, and also thirdly Itihash Charcha, 2nd volume, published by Ancholik Itihash or Loko Sanskriti Charcha Kendra. He acted as a special editor advisor of the World of Women, Locality, Nation and Beyond, published by Birut Jatiyo Sahitya Sammiloni. So I will like to now, I will request all the participants to kindly mute their microphone. So moving on, sorry for that inconveniences. I would like to request Dr. Rajarshi Chakraborty, sir, kindly take over the session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to the organizers and all the participants. I hope I am audible. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay. So today, what I wish to present today is that my topic is Orient and the West, differing views of looking at the past. Now, interestingly, we see that every civilization, every country, every nation has their different ways of looking at the past. From antiquity till today, various civilizations, various nations, various peoples have looked at their past in various ways. Now, within 30 minutes, I will not be able to discuss everything, but I will like to show you how the West looked at their history and how India or how Indians.
Sir, could you please unmute yourself? Rajarshi sir, we can't hear you. Dear participants, please bear with us. Yes.
Hello,
yes.
hello. Sorry, am I now audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So now we will see how people have looked at their past in different stages of history. Now, if we look at the ancient times, or rather at the time when people were gradually becoming civilized, civilizations were gradually developing, we see that there were 3 types of ways which developed. For example, we see that in the beginning there were ballads which gradually developed into epics. For example, we see that there were ballads which developed into epidemics like the epics like Gilgamesh's epic or the Iliad. Now, then we see that there were annals which were commemorating various rulers. And then we see that there were various scriptures. Now, these were not histories in the sense we consider it today, but they contained elements of history as people were trying to record their past through their ballads, through the annals of kings, or through various scriptures. Now, in classical antiquity in Greece, we see that what we call history today was gradually developing with Herodotus and Thucydides. Now, many of us have heard about Herodotus and Thucydides. Now, Herodotus, he wrote histories. The most important book which he wrote is Histories. Now, his aim was to preserve for posterity what he was seeing in his time. But in doing this, he was using things which we will today not consider as sources of history. For example, he was using rumors, he was using dreams, various things as sources of history, which today we will not be using. Now, Thucydides, he was more strict with his sources, and when he wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War, he wrote in details about the events that were connected with the war. So Herodotus and Thucydides, though both of them were Greek scholars, they also had their own differences in writing history. Herodotus was collecting various materials which we will not consider today as sources of history, but Thucydides was very particular from where he was collecting his sources. What were his sources? He was very strict about that. Now, after the Greeks, we see the Romans. Now, they had a deep piety, a sense of piety towards the past, promoted by traditional devotion of the aristocratic families of their ancestors. So their records were rather analytic. Their records, the Roman records, were analytic, and we see that the first proper historian, if we consider him, was the Roman historian was Cato, who wrote the Origins. In this way, he revolutionized history writing in Rome. Then we see that Livy, he wrote the history of Rome. And again, we see Tacitus, who wrote histories and annals. Now, what is important for the Romans is that they were writing history with a moral objective. They had a moral purpose. For example, Livy, he said that history should inculcate morals, teach civic virtues, and promote patriotism. On the other hand, if we see Tacitus also, we see that he also felt that history had a moral purpose. For example, he says that the chief duty of the historian, according to him, is to judge the actions of men, preserve from oblivion the deeds of good men, and hold up evil men for posterity's condemnation. So, Roman historians, their purpose of writing history was to have it was a moralistic stand. Now, moving on from Greece to Rome, from Greece and Rome, if we look at China, China, as we know, has a very old civilization. We see that in China, Siam Quan of the Han dynasty, he was the first to write history, and it was called Shiji, that is, record of the grand historian. So now here also we find that this history, the history Chinese historians were writing, these were rather genealogical tables and biographies of prominent people. That is, recordings about important kings and other important personalities. That was the basis of ancient Chinese historiography. If we now move on to India, now there is a saying that ancient Indians, they were not very conscious about history writing. They didn't have a proper history. Now this can't be fully accepted. Now, coming from history, if we look at the term itihasa, the term itihasa was in vogue in India. Now, itihasa, what does that mean? That which certainly had happened. So we had that term itihasa, which shows that we had our own way of looking at the past. Now, in the Mahabharata, we see that there is a definite definition of history. The Mahabharata states that dharma katha mukha da punasharam nitam purva britta katha mitihasa prachakhate. Arthat, what is history? History is that which gives us knowledge about the four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kam, and moksha. So we see that Mahabharata is talking about history. In Arthashastra also we see that Arthashastra mentions that the kings, provision should be made for the kings to listen to the past, to listen to history. Similarly, we see in Grija Sutra and Mannadi Sanghita that history is also history, or Itihasa and Puranas, they are also Vedas. They are not proper Vedas, but they are also Vedas. So we see that the concept of history was there in India also. Now, coming to the European part again, we see that with the coming of Christianity, the concept of history changed. Now, in Christian historiography, if we see Christendom, Christian historiography started with Luke Acts, which were the primary source for the apostolic age. Now, after Christianity was established as the state religion after Constantine I, we see that Christian historiography started to develop, and as the Bible was the basis of everything in Christianity, so we see that Christian historians, they had a preference for written records. As the Bible is a written text, we see that Christian historians had a preference for written sources. And they looked down upon earlier sources or earlier histories written during the Roman era, as they felt that those were written on the basis of oral sources. So here we see that there is a change with the coming of Christianity. Christian scholars, they believed that written records should be given more importance. So, and various historical writings were written during this period, like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Now, and we see that people like Gregory of Tours and others, they were successfully writing histories. Now, with the coming of the Renaissance, there was again a change in history and history writing. So, what happened with the coming of the Renaissance? We see that more importance started to be given not on written sources, but on archaeological findings. People during and after the Renaissance, they started saying that written records, which were mainly at that point of time, which were in the custody of the church or the church fathers, they can be manipulated. But archaeological remains, archaeological sources can't be manipulated. And we see that with the coming of the Renaissance, there was a flourishing of archaeological excavations, archaeological discoveries. People went out to find out archaeological sources. So here is again a shift which we see. So in the 15th and 16th centuries, with the Renaissance, we see the rise of antiquarians. These antiquarians, they were collecting ancient specimens. They may be coins, they may be images, whatever can be collected through archaeological excavations or findings. So this is very interesting. Now, we see that in the 19th century is considered the century for history. In the 19th century, there was a profound revolution in the conception, methodology, technique, and principles in the study of history. Scientific modern European historiography emerged in full form and content. In biological terms, it moved from youth to maturity in the course of this century. Certainly, in the increase of positive historical knowledge, the elaboration of sound historical method, the enlargement of the range of historical evidence, and especially in the development of historical way of looking at things, the 19th century stand out conspicuously among any century since the Renaissance. Now, scientific, critical, disciplined, systematic study of history really began in the 19th century. Now, in the 19th century, we see that various types of thoughts regarding history began to emerge. So, of this, we see that one was the German historians like Ranke and Niebuhr. So we see that they were giving strong stress on the sources. And to them, what was important is that what you collect from the sources, you must present them without any bias. Whatever you get from your sources, you should mention that only. There shouldn't be any bias in you regarding what you are getting. You should present that. So in this, there is a corollary they are drawing from natural science. For them, what science is doing is that what they are getting from their experiments, they are presenting. Similarly, historians should be without any bias. They should exactly present what they are getting. Now, this is one approach to history. So this history, this concept of history, that sources are important, and whatever you say should be based on sources, and you should be totally neutral with your sources. Now, in France, on the other hand, we see the development of the Annals School. Now, Annals School is different. What the Annals School said, that not only presentation of facts, there should be an analysis. Why things are happening? You can't state only facts that this I have found. Why has that happened? So that is important. And also the motive or people's mentalities. What were the motives for certain things to happen, or why did people do certain things? So we see that there are these two different types of approaches within Europe itself. Now, on the other hand, we see that in Italy, Benedetto Croce, he's saying that you can't be totally objective about history, because the historian is presenting historical facts from his present position. His present is leading or guiding his views about the past. And that's why he said that all history is contemporary history, since we see the past through the present. So Croce is saying another thing. He is saying that you can't be objective. What Ranke is saying, that you should objectively present facts, Croce is saying you can't be, because you are looking at the past through the present. So then again, we see that with the development of Marxism, Marxian historiography also developed, and Marxist historians claim that Marx, with his ideas of social evolution, is a coeval with Darwin, and that he should be justly regarded as the Darwin of social sciences. Marx adopted Hegelian dialectic with its characteristic features of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and applied it in explaining historical development. So, in late 19th century, there were two ways before the historian. He could either transmulate history into a sociological and evolutionary science, drawing inspiration from Comte, Marx, Spencer, or Taylor, or he could investigate and write history by means of scientific methods laid down by Rank without developing any hypothesis or inquiring after any law in history. Now, this much about Western historiography. Because I have limited time, let us now move to what was the situation in India. Now, in India, we see that by the 19th century, India was fully under the control of a colonial government. And we see that the colonizers, they were studying Indian institutions, Indian history, everything to ensure their rule in India. Now, we see that various English officials were writing about Indian history not because they were historians, but they wished to make other Europeans who were coming to India aware about this country. So we see that firstly, those who were writing history were actually civil servants or military officers of the East India Company who were writing histories. Of this, of course, we see some deviations also. For example, Sir William Jones, he was a humanist of the highest quality, and he was genuinely trying to understand India's past. Then in the British circles, we see that there were different types of people who were writing histories. Like we have evangelists who thought that India is a rotten place, and only spreading Christianity can redeem India. So various peoples like John Shore or Charles Grant were writing histories from this perspective. Then there were the rationalist utilitarians like James Mill. James Mill's History of British India, as we know, is one of the first British histories of India. Now, he divided Indian history into three periods: Hindu, Muslim, and British periods. And he also said that India is a degenerated place and it needs to be uplifted. On the other hand, we see after James Mill, we have Mountstuart Elphinstone. He was residing in India and he wrote a history in which he didn't say that everything which is in India or Indian history writing is totally rot. He presented a rather balanced view about India's past. Elphinstone had toyed with the idea of writing a history of the Marathas, but he couldn't give enough time for that. So one of his disciples, we see, Grant Duff wrote about history of the Marathas. So Grant Duff was one of the first Europeans to write about the Marathas. Then we see James Todd, who wrote about the history of Rajasthan. We know that his two important books, Travels in Western India and Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan, which was his first attempt, which was again first English attempt or British attempt to write history of Rajputana. Then we have Cunningham, who wrote the history of the Sikhs. So they were all residing in these places. For example, we see that Grant Duff, he was there at the court of Satara and he was writing about the history of the Marathas. We see that Todd served as a resident in various Rajput states and he was writing about the Rajputs. We see that Cunningham, he was a military officer also, and he was staying with the Sikhs and he was writing about the Sikhs. Now, this was another class of English historians who were not professional historians. All of them were military men they were staying in those places, and they are writing about the history of the people whom they were staying with. Now, after that, we see that another group of historians who were purely imperialist in their outlook came in. For example, we see that Hunter, W. Hunter, he was purely an imperialist. He knew the art of history writing, and the things which he wrote, for example, History of British India, Annals of Rural Bengal, Rulers of India series, Indian Musalmans, all these were written from an imperialist perspective. Now, let us turn to how the Indians were viewing this. What was the stand of the Indian historians? Now we see that R.C. Majumdar, he says that Indians who started writing in the 19th century, there were various reasons why they had started writing. One is that they were learning how to write history from the Western sources, and they tried to implement that in India, or writing about India. Secondly, they tried to counter certain arguments that were being placed by the European historians. So, and we see that in this way, they started writing their own histories. Now, as we know that British rule was first established in Bengal, and the Bengali intelligentsia was the first to get Western education. And so history writing also started, first of all, in Bengal. Derosians, as we know them, they established the Society for Acquisition of General Knowledge, and in that they started writing about India's history from a nationalistic, liberalistic point of view. Then we see that other scholars like Bhagavan Lal Indraji, Bhav Daji, Rajendra Lal Mitra, they were also writing histories from their own perspective. So now Rajendra Lal Mitra can be considered the first scientific historian of modern India. His books, like the Antiquities of Orissa and his books on Buddha Gaya, are very significant. Now, here also you see that these books are on archaeology. The argument that the British were using, for example, James Mill was using, that Indians are a degraded people. Throughout their history, they were degraded. Only outsiders had come and upgraded them little. So before the British came, there were the Muslims who had upgraded them to some extent, and then the British came to further upgrade them. So this was the line of argument of James Mill. So to counter that, Indian historians, they were taking recourse to archaeology. Literature can be molded, but you can't mold archaeology. So we see that Rajendra Lal Mitra, whom we consider the first modern historian of India, he is writing on antiquities, on archaeological remains, which you can't manipulate. Now, Rajendra Lal Mitra influenced Horoprasad Shastri, who wrote on Buddhism in Bengal. Then Ramesh Chandra Datta, he wrote a history of civilization in ancient India in 3 volumes. So we see that these historians, they were trying to rewrite history of India. They were learning the process of writing history from the West, but they were applying it in India in their own ways. Similarly, we see that Kabiraj Shamol Das, he wrote Vivi Vinod, a 5-volume history of Mewar. So similarly, we see that the Maratha historians like Kashinath Timbak Telang or Vishwanath Kashinath Ranade or others like them, they were writing histories in their own ways. They were countering the history that was written by the British, and they were writing the history of the Marathas in their own way. Similarly, we see that how much time do we have? Hello?
Sir, you have 4 minutes left.
Okay, I am concluding. So, for example, we see that in case of Shayyad Ahmed Khan, we all know about Shayyad Ahmed Khan. So, he also contributed to history writing in his own way, because he was trying to uplift the condition of the Muslims, and he tried to write history in his own way. So people were trying to write histories in their own ways so as to counter the impact of the West. So we see that Sir Shoyad Ahmed, he was writing Asar Us Sanadit. In 1847, it was published, Asar Us Sanadit. Then also we see that, then again we see that Sayyid Ahmed Khan, he was writing on the revolt. And he said that there were the causes of the revolt was this. He countered the British argument, and in this way, he was the only one from the Indian who placed the Indian view before the British government. So we see that histories were being written in different ways. And we see that Shoyad Ahmed Khan also edited Abul Fazl's Aine Akbari, Barani's Tuzuki Firoz Shahi, Emperor Jahangir's autobiography Tuzuk-e Jahangiri. So we see that in various ways, they were writing histories. Now, they were not only writing histories. We see that institutions like the Asiatic Society. The Asiatic Society was a institution established by the British. Similarly, we see that Indians were establishing such institutions. For example, we see that various museums like the Barendra Gobeshana Kendra was established with the monetary help of the Zamindar of Dighapatia. So we see that museums, archives were being established. For example, we see the Bongyo Shaitto Sangshad and all that. So institutions were also getting established for studying history, for preserving history. And this is how we see that Western ideas were influencing Indian history writing, but at the same time, the Indians were trying to establish their separate identity, trying to discuss their histories in a different way, especially because of the nascent nationalism that was gradually developing in them, which we see that as we move more towards independence, we see that this trend was gradually increasing. So I think I should stop here today. And if there are questions, I can continue later.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an edifying speech. We could know a lot about the writing of history and a lot about the how the Indian scholars could, you know, take away the important facets of the Western history and could apply it in India. Thank you so much. We could know a lot about it. Till now, I think we didn't receive any such questions. But if any further questions comes up, we will be definitely mailing you, sir, for your kind reply. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Uh, I
Very
think
welcome.
Dr. Tini Goswami has a question. Ma'am, could you please ask it over here?
Uh, Sir, can you hear me? I'm so sorry. I didn't type my question in the chat box. Rather, I'm not that much expert in that particular regard, like handling how the technical devices. So, this is not a question. I would like to know what is your opinion about the subaltern historiography or the postmodernist approach of knowing history, and how you can relate those approaches to have a better understanding of the relationship between East and West.
Actually, I couldn't go up to that till the present because there are constraints of time. Actually, I thought that I will be given 45 minutes, but later I came to know that it is 30 minutes. So that part I had to leave behind. Now, yes, subaltern historiography or postmodern history writing, as you said, certainly there are connections with the West. West has influenced this, but what we see that earlier historians in the 19th century, the historians of the 19th century, they were adapting the methods from the West, but they were trying to use it in their own ways. But later on, we see that this trend is gradually decreasing. The methods are Western, the subjects are Indian, but this separation or this independence of thought, which the 19th century historians had, I don't think that subaltern or postmodern historians do have that type of an independent thinking. And moreover, both, as you know, that subaltern and postmodern history or history writing, there is a lot of debate regarding these schools of thought. So it is very difficult to say anything very conclusively about how far they have been able to uh, promote or move on with Indian history writing. What is did they have any uh, contribution, significant contribution in Indian history writing or not? So that is a debatable issue.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Though in the mails to our respected speakers, we have mentioned the time, like, but somehow I'm really sorry for this inconvenience that that you had no idea about how many minutes we are providing to our speakers. I'm so sorry for this inconvenience, but
No, no,
thank you
it's
for
okay.
your
Actually, it was my fault. I should have checked it.
thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, okay.
Thank you so much, sir. And we did have only one question, but still, it was such a erudite discussion. Now, moving on to our second speaker of the day, she is Dr. Vandana Mukherjee. Uh, a very good evening, ma'am. Yes, I think she is here. So, she has passed her master's in Pali with a special paper in art and archaeology, inscription, iconography, and ancient Indian geography from the University of Calcutta in 1978. She passed with the position of first class third from the university. She obtained PhD degree in Humanities from the University of Calcutta in 1991 for her thesis entitled Some Aspects of Social Life as Revealed in Dhammapada Atthakatha in Pali. She passed Tibetan certificate examination in 1989 from the University of Calcutta and was placed in first class with the first position. She passed her Tibetan diploma examination in Tibetan language and literature, Calcutta University, and was placed in first class and first position. She completed in service course training in musicology and manuscriptology. She completed in service course training in manuscriptology and paleography, and she was language and script known in Brahmi, Devanagari, Newari, medieval Bengali, Gauri, Mongolian, Tibetan, etc. She has a huge research experience. She was a research scholar in the Department of Pali from in Calcutta University from the years 1981 to 1984. She was also the R.L. Mitra Research Fellow in the Asiatic Society, Calcutta, from 1985 to 1989. And she completed her work entitled Buddhist Ethics and Philosophy in Dhammapada Atthakatha in comparison with other Pali canonical literature. She was a research associate junior, second level, Tibetan studies in the Asiatic Society, Calcutta from 1992 to 1996. The name of her project was Bhotias and their integration with Indian mainstream. She was a Charles Wells Fellow in the year 1994. At present, she is the research officer in Asiatic Society and she is also the guest lecturer in Tibetan language in the University of Kolkata since 1995. She is also a visiting faculty in the Department of Center for Himalayan Studies (NBU) and the Department of Sanskrit in Jadavpur University. She published almost 58 articles and one book. Ma'am, we are very much, enlightened to have you over here. I would kindly request ma'am to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, you kindly unmute yourself, please.
Now, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Before going to my speak regarding this year, I would like to convey my Sharodiya greetings and also express my heartfelt thanks to both to the organizers and also the collaborators who gave me the FDP, the Faculty Development Program, who gave me chance to share my views with you. Today my topic is the different aspects of manuscriptology. I don't know how far I can try to explain you within this short time, but I shall try my level best to be clear to you. And if you have any question, then you can ask me. I shall mainly explain. My lecture is on 4 parts. In the first part, I shall explain the word manuscript and manuscriptology. Then next point is the process of handling manuscript and identification, decipherment and cataloging of manuscript after step by step. Then the preservation and conservation of manuscripts. And finally, the editing of the text, which is the main object of manuscripts, manuscriptology. Now, a question comes, what is manuscript? The word manuscript is a combination of the 2 Latin words, manus and scribere. Here, manus means hand and scribere means scratch or the writing. So in that sense, any written document can be regarded as manuscript. Is it so? No. The written documents on wood, skin, suppose the stone, palm leaf, these are not palm leaf. In ancient period, many things were written on wood and copper plate also, but these are not the manuscripts. Not even the written documents or archival documents. These are the archives and engravings. But what is manuscript? Whatever is written on skin, bhujopatro, or the palm leaf, then it can be said the manuscript. Then what is the difference between all are the written documents? Then what is the difference between these two types of writing, supposing inscriptions and also the paper? The difference is that, the primary difference is that the object of manuscript is the disseminating knowledge, while the object of inscription is to propagate a news or the rule. And secondly, whenever anything is engraved in either copperplate or the inscriptions or the stone inscription or anything else, it remains the same. It reaches to the scholars after a long days with same news. But in case of manuscript, it is not so. Why it is not so? In case of manuscripts is changed variously by the hands. With same manuscript you can find in many institutions. Same, how it is possible? During that period, when there was no system of copying, it is several copies of manuscripts were made. So the manuscripts changed variously, of which I shall discuss you later. Then I am coming my first point, that is what is manuscript and manuscriptology. The word manuscript is rendered in various ways. It is rendered as pustako, then grontho, then pandulipi. Why it is called pustako? We know in the Saraswati Sutra, Bina pustako ranjita. And what is pustako? The word pustako came from the word pusta or pustu. That means skin. So writing on skin or the parchment, you know, is very common material of written material in ancient period. Then the manuscript is also called grontho. Because why it is called grontho? We know that the manuscripts are bounded with a thread and with a particular type of knot. And these knots, this is called in gronthi. From gronthi, the word came grontho. And then the very popular word, most of us know, that is the pandulipi. Pandu manuscript is Sanskrit scholars told manuscript is pandulipi. Why it is called pandulipi? Pandulipi is the pandu and lipi. The word pandu means the dull. Writing on the slates or writing after long days, it becomes dull. So it is called pandur. And then it is called the lipi is writing. That is why it is called the pandulipi. Then what is manuscriptology? The word pandulipi, the word, I think it is necessary to say here, the word pandulipi is a very later word. In the earlier period, it was used as pustako and grontho. And what is manuscriptology? The manuscriptology is a modern term from which two offshoots can be deciphered. One is paleography, that is lekho kormon, and the other is text editing, that is the pustako byaparo. Sanskrit literature clearly shows that in ancient period, the people were quite aware of these two types of work. For instance, we can say the Banbhatto in his famous work, Kadambari, in the chapter entitled Chandra Prida Shiksha, clearly distinguished these two words. So it is established that the ancient people know these two types of work. So this is the explanation of these two words and why we are using manuscript and manuscriptology. Now I am coming to my second point, that is the manuscriptology and its decipherment. Suppose whenever we talk about the manuscript, the picture which appears before us is that a bundle of either palm leaves or the papers or anything else which were bounded with a thread and sometimes kept haphazardly or sometimes kept properly, either in a red shallow or in white clothes or yellow clothes. I can tell you, suppose you go to any monastery, Tibetan monastery or any temple, you can see the manuscripts. Supposing if you go to the Mahabodhi Society, you can see after the image of Buddha, there are a lot of manuscripts are there kept in that way. Over this bundle, there is one hard cover that is called the molar. This hard cover was prepared on wood and it was tagged with a thread and the label was there. This is the picture of manuscript. I'm very sorry, I have not prepared any PPT, then I can show you the picture. Due to the paucity of time, I couldn't do it. Anyway, so suppose if any scholar, this manuscript has not touched by any scholars, in that case, the scholar or the cataloger, what he have to do, I will tell you, from which you can have an idea of working with manuscript, which is, I think, the most important point of today's discussion. It is very important that one thing, the manuscript writer, the author of the manuscript maintained uniformity in writing in all respects. What is that uniformity? So therefore, a manuscript cataloger, when open this bundle, what he have to do, from this haphazard piece of paper, he have to first take all the papers which are similar in size, similar of the materials of writing, number of the writing in each lines, same handwriting and folio number. Why I am telling this, I shall explain you later. So he have to keep in his mind these 5 points: similar in handwriting, similar in the size of the folios, similar in the maintaining the number of lines and folio numbers. Then he or she should tie the folios with a thread and the knot, what I told, that is granthi. After that, the third step, he will prepare a tag on a piece of paper. And in this tag, he or she have to write some points to identify that manuscript. First, he will put one number, suppose S1 or S2 or Sanskrit text, the Tibetan text, Tibetan 1 or 2, he will put a number according to the institution where it is kept. This is the manuscript number, and the accession number is different. I will tell you later. That depends on the librarian of that area. Then he will decipher what is the name of the manuscript and the author. And then he go to the subject and number of folios. When he has identified everything, number of folios, and finally, he may write the collection from where he received this bundle. Regarding the subject, I can say, suppose all persons is not possible to know the subject of manuscript, because every person is not belonging to, are not expert of all subjects. Then how he would do? Suppose he got the name of the manuscript. In that case, he have to follow, there is one book, New Catalogus Catalogorum and Catalogus Catalogorum, published by Madras Oriental Library. But with this book, he have to find out, as like the dictionary, the name of the manuscript. And there it has been done very good way, what subject it belongs. Here I like to say, as I'm working in the Asiatic Society, I'm very proud of it, because first the Asiatic Society, which is the earliest, I can say, first research institution of Asia, which first started this work of cataloging manuscript and the system of cataloging, which is now followed throughout the world, not only, also followed by the National Mission Manuscript, the government of India in our country, and also in abroad. Anyway, now I'm coming to, again, returning to my former point, that he will make a tag and tie it with the manuscript. Indeed, in that way, he will identify all these manuscripts. After that, what he will do, so in that case, I think it is necessary to say here that the National Mission Manuscript and also the Calcutta University and Jagannath University very often organizes workshop on manuscriptology. Many students are coming from different parts in subjects, and they are taking this training, and they also become the expertise and also took job in our institute also, and also in other institutes. They can work and they can devote themselves in this work and also edit the manuscript. So what is that? Whenever he will, so now I am detailing this point. That is, the National Mission Manuscript made 17 points which he have to write for preparing the base cat, that means the hand list or the descriptive catalog. What are these points? I am going through that point. First, the manuscript number or the accession number, then title, the other title, and author. What is the other title? Suppose one book, I'm giving one example, books is on lexicon. That book is named Amara Kosha. There is the other title, that is the Namolinganu Shasana. So In one manuscript, it is written Amorokosh. In other manuscript, it is written Namalinganu Shasanam. The scholar who doesn't know, he have to consult that CC, that means Catalogus Catalogogram. But in his hand list, he have to write both of these names. Then he has to name the Amoroshin author's name. Then subject, language of the manuscript, the script, then date, whether the manuscript is complete or incomplete, then material, size, number of folios. If any folio is missing, then that portion, the condition of the manuscript. These 17 points he or she have to write and have to keep with that manuscript separately. Now, I am discussing all these points, how he could understand the script or the materials or anything else. Script. Texts in ancient India were written in various scripts. A list of scripts, about 64 in number, were mentioned in the Lolita Vistaro, which is the biography of Lord Buddha belonging to the Mahayana Buddhism. I am quoting some portions of Lolita Vistaro. Brahmi, Khoroshti, Pushkarosharin, Ongolipi, Bongolipi, Mogodoliping, Parasholiping, Dravidoliping, Kiratoliping, Chinoliping, Hunoliping, Nagoroliping, Bajroliping, and blah blah. So we are seeing that lots in this way 64 name of the 64 lipis were mentioned there. So long the Harappan script was not deciphered, we can say the earliest Indian script was Brahmi script. Yesterday, Professor Ranjana Rai shown some tablets which are discovered.
Dear participants, kindly bear with us. There are some technical glitches.
There are three stages of Brahmi script. One is Ashokan Brahmi, which starts from 3rd century BC to 1st century AD. And
Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear us? Dr. Vandana Mukherjee? Dear participants, please bear with us.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, could you please repeat?
Is there any problem?
Yes. We couldn't hear you for 2-3 minutes. So, if you repeat the earlier discussion, it will be better for the participants.
Now it's okay. Achha. Earlier discussion. I told that the National Mission manuscript has prescribed, but it is generally prescribed that there are 17 points of manuscript for the identification of a particular manuscript. These 17 points have to be mentioned in the descriptive catalog or in the hand list and should be put with each and every manuscript. Is it okay now, Tinni? Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Then I am discussing okay, thank you. Then I am discussing one after another these 17 points. First, I am discussing about the script. Texts were written in various scripts in ancient period. A list of various scripts, about 64 in number, is mentioned in the Lolita Vistaro, which is the Buddhist literature. I am quoting that portion. The Brahmi, Khoroshti, Pushkarosharing, Ongolipi, Bongolipi, Mogodolipi, Shokaroliping, Parasholiping, Kiratoliping, Chinoliping, Hunoliping, Nagoroliping, Bajroliping, etc. So long the Harappan script has not yet discovered, properly deciphered, we think that it is established that the Brahmi lipi is the earliest Indian script. No manuscript was written in Brahmi script, except some ancient period, the Ashokan inscription and other inscriptions were written mostly in Brahmi and somewhere in Khoroshti. Yesterday we have seen Professor Ranjana Rai showed some inscription stones with inscriptions written in Ashokan Brahmi on a river bank of Saraswati. Anyway, The Brahmi has 3 stages. One is Ashokan Brahmi, that date is 3rd century BC. The next one is Kushana Brahmi. The Kushana Brahmi starts during the reign of Kushana king Konishko from 1st century AD to 3rd century, 1st century AD to 3rd century AD. Prior that, Ashokan Brahmi was in vogue, but no manuscript was available in that script. Then comes the Gupta Brahmi, which start from latter part of the 3rd century BC and or the first part of the 4th century AD, latter part of the 3rd century AD, or first part of the 4th century AD up to 7th century AD. So here, one thing very interesting, the Gupta Brahmi, you can say the mother from which all other scripts came, even our Bengali. That is the separate point I will not discuss here. Next, if any occasion comes, then I will say it is a very big point. Anyway, I can give you one example of a manuscript of written in 7th century AD, which you can see in the Asiatic Society. The name of the manuscript is Kubjika Moto. This manuscript was one Buddhist manuscript written on palm leaf and
Dear participants, kindly bear with us. We are facing few technical glitches.
I think it is necessary.
Ma'am?
You can see the Brahmi script. Yes.
Ma'am,
Hello.
ma'am, you are facing certain technical problem, certain internet problem. Could you please repeat from 2 minutes back?
Hello. Earliest manuscript written in the 7th century AD. Is it from this point?
Yes,
there are 3
yes, ma'am.
stages. It is from
Yes,
this
ma'am.
point.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
available. You can see a specimen of an earliest manuscript kept in the Asiatic Society, Kolkata. The name of this manuscript is Kubjika Moto. This manuscript was written in later Gupta Brahmi script. I told the 3 stages of manuscript. I think you have listened it. And in this stage, the third stage is Gupta Brahmi. And the Gupta Brahmi is the mother of all Indian script that I had told before. I don't know whether I can be audible or not on that portion. Anyway, because from Gupta Brahmi came many scripts, even our Bengali also, from Gauri or the Kutila Lipi. Anyway, this is a separate discussion. I will not tell here due to the paucity of time. So this manuscript you can find here. And another thing is, you know, the Brahmi script has been deciphered by Sir James Prinsep on 1837, which is recorded in the Journal of the Asiatic Society. And before that, some letters were deciphered by some people, but throughout the Brahmi script was deciphered in the Asiatic Society by James Prinsep. And after that, the history of India then reveals to us. Then I am discussing my next point, that is material. In ancient times, materials used for writing are bhujjo patro, or the bhujjo birch bark, then parchment, palm leaf, teret pata, shachi patro. You have heard this name, shachi patro. Mainly Assamese manuscripts were written on shachi patro, a type of special tree available in Assam. And finally, the tulot kagos, or the handmade paper. Of all these manuscripts, the palm leaf and birch bark were oldest material for writing. The specimen of oldest Indian script, deciphered as the Kushana Brahmi, were discovered from Turfan area of Central Asia. The material of these manuscripts were palm leaf. The language is Sanskrit, and the approximate date of this manuscript were 1st century AD to 3rd century AD. Because during that period in India, the script used was that for writing was that Gupta Brahmi. These manuscripts were named as Turfano manuscript because it is discovered from Turfan. Presently, this manuscript was kept in the Berlin National Museum, Germany. I would like to give some examples of these birch bark and the palm leaf manuscripts. Living example is very interesting. An important manuscript recovered from Turfan area of Bakshali village, which was known as Bakshali manuscript. This, till today, it is proof that the Bakshali manuscript on arithmetic was written on Bhurjapatra is one of the most important manuscripts on science. The script of this manuscript was Sharoda. Sharoda Lipi was mainly from the manuscript from the Kashmir and the Gandhara area. Some Shoivite Brahmin of Bengal wrote this manuscript in mixed Sanskrit and Gandhari Prakrit language. Very recently, in 2017, Oxford Library, University Library made a carbon dating examination of this manuscript to find out the exact date. This manuscript was consisted of 70 leaves, and they have proved that some portions within these 17 leaves were written on 3rd to 4th century, while the other portions were written within 5th to 7th century. Another example, I'm giving the oldest birch bark manuscript. The birch bark manuscript, I think most of you have listened, those who have worked on the medicine, especially I am talking about the theory, heard the name of the Bauer manuscript. The Bauer manuscript is on the earliest manuscript on medicine, as it was discovered from the Turfan area. The Bauer manuscript, the main Alexander A. Rudolph Hornell decided, who examined this manuscript, and in his view, the main portion of this manuscript was written in 475 AD, while the other portions were written either in 425 AD or before. And the subject matter of this manuscript was medicine. Medicine means nidano. That means the medicines of different diseases, discussion of which we can find in the Pali literature also, in the Vinaya Pitaka, in the Veshajya Khanda. And there is one chapter in the Bauer manuscript where we can find the medicine for snake biting. Medicine for snake biting. Then I would like to say, this one manuscript was preserved in the British Museum. Tokyo Museum, Japan also has many Pandu manuscripts. I myself has seen also. And in India, you can find the Bhurjapatra manuscript in the National Archives, Delhi. They have a good number of Bhurjapatra manuscripts. But in our institute, there is only one Bhurjapatra manuscript, and it is also in very brittle condition. Anyway, the use of handmade paper, or the country-made paper, was started from 12th century onwards, and it is very popular. Then I'm coming to the next point, that is sizes. I have already shown that those manuscript authors maintain the uniformity in writing. So the manuscripts are of different sizes. The biggest manuscript which we find, that is always, that size is 3.5 feet the smallest one.
Dear participants, kindly bear with us. There are certain technical problems, especially with the internet thing. Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am,
The Tibetan xylograph, you can see in the different monasteries. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're audible now. There was some technical. Yes, ma'am. You're audible now.
Repeat.
Can you please repeat the last minute?
So.
Like the biggest manuscript, that one you are telling from there.
Biggest manuscript, the size of the biggest manuscript was, so far it is at least was 3.5 feet long and 1 feet to 18 feet breadth. Manuscript is in oblong in size, so it is in that way. And the smallest manuscript so far it is
Dear participants, please bear with us. We are facing some technical glitches. So thank you for your cooperation, and we are trying to fix the problems as soon as possible. Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear me? Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear me? So, Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear me? So,
Ma'am, 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 kindly you can mute your video and keep your audio on. Ma'am, if you can kindly mute your video. Bandana ma'am, if you can kindly mute your video and keep your audio on, your net will process better.
we are really sorry for this inconvenience. Please bear with us. Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear? Can you hear me?
Dear participants, kindly bear with us. Due to some technical glitches, we are facing this kind of problem. It's due to the net connectivity issue. So if you just give us few minutes, we are trying to resume the talk. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Please bear with us for a few more minutes. We are trying to solve the problem as soon as possible. Thank you, participants.
Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, can you hear us? Dr. Vandana Mukherjee? Dr. Vandana Mukherjee?
So we have amongst us Dr. Vandana Mukherjee again. She's trying to connect to the audio. Kindly bear with us.
Dear participants, thank you for your cooperation. We have Dr. Vandana Mukherjee again. She is trying to connect with us. So thank you so much for your cooperation. Dr. Mukherjee, can you hear us? We can see you.
Ma'am, if you can kindly mute your video, so you will get a better net connectivity. Yes, ma'am. উনি অডিওটা অন করেননি। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আসলে উনি অডিও কানেক্ট করছেন এখনো। Ask to unmute. হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ। Thank you so much, participants, for bearing with us.
Yeah, I think there is no problem of internet from your side, is it? I cannot understand.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible now.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, participants, for bearing with us.
Get the time because.
Yes, sure, ma'am. You can continue. You can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Take your time. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Then what I saw, there are folios. You know, the folios, the front. I'm regarding starting from the folio. No, is it? Hello, hello. The folios of the manuscript.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. Texts were written on both sides of the folios. The front side of the folio is called recto, and the back side is called verso. Technically, it is called side A and side B. In this, each manuscript is started with a salutation to gods either by Ganesh or Shiv, whichever god is the worshipped by the author or the scribe. And on the left side of the folio, started first with the gods, then the name of the manuscripts and the author. And on the left side of the margin of the folio in the recto side, you can find the name of the text is mentioned, and also the name of the chapter and very important portion. Because suppose in this bundle, in a bundle of the manuscript, there is no front page and no back last page. So where from we'll get the name of the text? We can give. So in that case, the scholar have to go through the whole manuscripts and can see that there is the manuscript writes continuously and left some spaces for the comma. They used one stroke, and for the full stop they use for 2 strokes. And sometimes they draw a picture of pot or the picture of flower to denote also. This is the coming the punctuation portion. Punctuation portion, what is that? I told about the punctuation. Then I'm coming the last portion, that is the punctuation. The manuscript is very, very important thing. It has already been mentioned that in that colophon we can find
Dr. Mukherjee, we cannot hear you. Dear participants, we are facing some technical glitches again. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Dr. Mukherjee, are you there? Dr. Mukherjee, we can't hear you.
Dear participants, kindly bear with us. We are facing certain technical glitches. Extremely sorry, dear participants. Due to some technical glitches, we had to move on to our next session. So the next session will be emceed by Dr. Tini Goswami. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good evening to all of the participants, and we are so sorry that we had to skip the previous session because we were facing some technical glitches. So please bear with us, and we missed a very important lecture because the lecture was very interesting, and we are really sorry for this inconvenience. So for our third session of day 3, we have Dr. Abhishek Bose. So welcome, sir, and it's my privilege to introduce you. Dr. Abhishek Bose is a PhD in comparative literature and teaches in the Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature at the University of Calcutta, Kolkata. His research interests include, among other things, Bhakti movement with special emphasis on Vaishnavism, aesthetics and literary theory, performance studies. He is currently leading 2 research projects: Lives of a Text, Traditions of Ramayana Performance in India and Thailand, and the Vaishnava Encyclopedia project. For the past few years, he has been working on a book on Madhavendra Puri and the prehistory of Chaitanya Vaishnavism. He is also engaged in exploring various genres of performance as a practitioner. So, welcome, sir, and please take over the session. Dr. Abhishek Bose.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Goswami, for your kind words. And I thank the organizers, the Bhaktivedanta Research Center, St. Xavier's College, Stockhome University, and all the collaborators. Actually, at the outset, let me begin with a statutory warning. I am still kind of struggling with the title, although it is given by me, Connecting Cultures, Comparing Literatures. Comparing and connecting literatures and cultures, how to do that? The more I think about it, I see myself looking at a dark, spiraling void, and hence I am scared to the core, especially when I am presenting in front of such an erudite audience of scholars, teachers, educationists. But I have to accept this predicament, and please bear with me. Being a student of comparative literature, it is naturally expected of me that I would present an overview of the discipline, a trajectory, the necessity and practicability of the discipline, and so on. It could have been done. Who has used the term comparative literature for the first time in Germany or England? In which year? Then how it acquired momentum in the US of A. Thereafter, how the discipline spread its roots in India or Asia for that matter. All these things could have been outlined in the course of this presentation. But my sincere apologies, I am not going to do any of those things in today's presentation. Firstly, because all that information is available on any self-respecting search engine. So you don't need to bear with me for that second-hand information. And secondly, I do not find it appealing or interesting enough to do. Instead, what I offer you a conversation, an intimate conversation, a conversation, or as I prefer to call it, Shanglap, Samlap. Though samlapa is often translated as dialogue, it is much more than that. Etymologically, it is sam plus lap, the root lap, plus a. Here, sam signifies sampurna or complete, and samyaka or proper or perfect. The root lap means the act of speaking, to speak. So the meaning of the term sanglapa becomes a complete or proper conversation. And the conversation or discussion can be complete only when it is a discussion between two or more people. Now the question is, who is the second person with whom I am supposed to have this conversation here? The question can be approached from more than one way. Firstly, the people in the audience, that means you can be that person. Secondly, this can be a conversation with my own self, as any conversation primarily is a conversation with your own self. And thirdly, this can be a conversation between me and my discipline. Who I am, who is this me? I am a student of comparative literature. I have done some researches in the field, and now I am teaching in a department called Comparative Indian Language and Literature. So, in short, I am someone who has been associated with the discipline for quite some time through a host of relationships, and who is still trying to figure out what comparative literature means. What does it entail? And the relationships make the conversation intimate, because apparently a relation is something which takes us from the exterior to the interior. At least that is what we like to believe. So much for intimacy. As soon as I say this, someone might interject. If you do not have any clear idea about what comparative literature means, then what are you teaching your students in your classrooms? Or what are you presenting to those unfortunate souls attending such and such FDPs and your talk? I have rehearsed one answer for this question, but before that, please tell me, does a relationship have any chance of survival? A relationship, does it have any chance of survival if you already know all about your partner, the other person in the relationship? I think the uncertainty whether my beloved is going to say yes or no to my proposition, that uncertainty is the driving force behind any kind of relationship. And my sympathies to those who claim or who have known all about their partners all along. My sympathies. This statement about human relationships can be extended to include our relationships with objects or ideas even.
Sir,
Therefore,
sorry to interrupt you. Sir,
yes,
could
please.
you please increase the volume of your mic?
Oh, it's at 100%.
One
Is it
speaker,
better now?
yeah, one participant has written that your voice is coming in a low tune. So hope it's fine. Yeah, thank you, sir. And I'm extremely sorry to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
no, 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 no. It's okay. So I was saying this statement about human relationships can be extended to include our relationships with objects or ideas. Therefore, it is equally applicable to my relationship with comparative literature or the idea of comparative literature. One of my teachers used to say that the problem about any idea, all ideas, is that an idea cannot exist in the void. That is to say, an idea necessarily has to be about an individual or an object. It is consciousness about someone or something. It is not consciousness in itself. Consciousness is always about something or someone. The interesting thing is the moment I think of or I think about my own self, someone or something else will enter my thought. I cannot think about my own self without thinking of the other and vice versa. The self and the other are always simultaneous. They cannot exist without each other. Now, if the self and the other are considered as two extremes, the self and the other, then the valley between them can be the field of comparative literature. Why? Even if you take the popular notion of comparative literature, what is that? That of comparison between two texts, two genres, two cultures, that is comparative literature, or popular belief is that about comparative literature. Then you are actually engaging with the other, because you cannot make any comparisons unless you have at least one other entity. You need at least two entities to compare. Still better, your journey would be from exclusion to inclusion. Excuse me. In other words, you have to forge relationships. You have to become many from one. As the Upanishad says, Eko aham bahusyam. We can say that this plurality is the foundation of comparative literature. Because if there is no plurality, no difference, how do you get multiple phenomena to compare? Maybe you are looking for similarities or resemblances among literatures or cultures. You are looking for similarities, but to begin with, you have to start with differences. You need very badly differences, otherwise you cannot start to compare. If you are narcissistic or self-complacent, you cannot practice comparative literature by any means. Thus, plurality becomes both the way and the aim of comparative literature, both the way and the aim. As one of my favorite poets, Zbigniew Herbert, has beautifully captured in his poem, Elegy of Fortinbras, and I quote, "It is not for us to greet each other or bid farewell. We live on archipelagos, and that water, these words, what can they do? What can they do, Prince? We live on archipelagos." We all know that India is necessarily pluralistic, and yet you cannot ever possibly overemphasize upon this fact of pluralism. This is not a choice for us. This is our situation. This is a given. Your mother tongue is Maithili, Nepali, Gujarati, or Oriya, and you study a degree course in English or Sanskrit or Hindi. Say you are a student in a Sanskrit department, and yet the moment you try to read a play in your syllabus, you have to learn two or more forms of Prakrita or Apabhramsha languages. The context is such that the characters are supposed to use different languages within the same play, and it is expected from the audience that they will relate to that multilinguality without any effort, with ease. You are a student of Bangla or Hindi literature, say, but you have to have your own share of Shakespeare or Maupassant, not as additional references. You would not be able to understand the course of Indian dramaturgy without considering the reception of Shakespeare, without O. Henry or Maupassant, you cannot grasp the phenomena of short stories in India at all. In fact, we have reasons to believe that outside the syllabi, Shakespeare has been more popular in India than his home turf in England. And if you look at the syllabi of English literature at any Indian university, you will see that Rabindranath Tagore, Amrita Pritam, or Sadat Hasan Manto have found their proud places in those syllabi. In translation, so to speak, if you study any Indian language or literature, you have to essentially engage with other languages and other literatures, that is, other people. And is this plurilingualism limited only to the syllabi? You cannot live for one day if you are not using more than one language for your everyday purposes. We are constantly switching between codes, dialects, languages, and scripts every day, wherever we are. You are riding a cab, buying 1 kilogram of potato, watching your favorite films or listening to your favorite songs, or checking even your WhatsApp updates. And all the while, you are practicing plurilingualism without even knowing the term. I have been told that the participants in this FDP course, they are located across the map of India. And I think that all of them would relate to what I am saying now. Therefore, plurilingualism and pluriculturalism are part and parcel of our very existence, of every individual who is an Indian. That is why I would like to state that there can be no single literature in India. I know there might be many esteemed scholars from so-called single literature disciplines present here, and please do not take it otherwise. If you come to think about it, even for the basic purpose of finishing your curriculum, can you really restrict yourself to any one language or literature? Our respective syllabi, be it Hindi, Bangla, Maithili, Gujarati, our respective syllabi already contain elements from other language cultures, and the disciplinary boundaries are not at all watertight. We cannot afford to be single, pun intended. Basically, our languages and literatures keep transgressing all such boundaries of imagined singularity as they are alive. And because they are living, they are organisms, they enter into relationships, into what we have termed as sanglap. On the level of language, new words and concepts from other cultures are added every day. In literature, texts are translated, adapted, transmitted all the while. If you remember just one example, the word time has gained currency in most parts of India going by the popular usage. It has replaced samay, kal, kshan, and it has become an everyday Indian word, time. For text transmission, I have one favorite example. In many Indian languages, the translations of the Bangla novels of Sharat Chandra Chatterjee are so popular that people often think that Sharat Chandra belongs to their own language and they will be very upset if you tell them otherwise. I had one such curious encounter with a Malayali fan of Sharat Chandra once. Therefore, the texts and concepts travel to and fro, inter and intra-linguistic ways. All attempts of compartmentalizing literatures within singularity are bound to fail. Basically, this notion of single literature departments are primarily an impact of colonization. The European nations were mostly uniliterary. One culture, one nation. Spain is identifiable with Spanish, England with English, France with French, and so on. When Europe turned towards a system of one nation, one language, we have modeled our nationalism on that basis. Therefore, the education system that was being established here also adhered to the single literature department model and the concept of nationalism inherent within that system. But there is no one language called Indian for India or Bharatiya for Bharat. There is no language called Indian. Of course, our cultures and languages were always interacting among themselves. Of course, there were registers like Gaudiya, Oriya, Maithili, Audhi, Brajbhasha. I am talking about this side of the Vindhya. But there was no absolute borders between two such registers. That is why the earliest example of any literary compositions in the Bhasha, modern Indian languages, the Charjapad, they are claimed by Bangla, claimed by Maithili, Oriya, Ahomiya, and other people. These conflicting claims of owning Charjapad actually represent one brilliant moment in our literary history. A moment when some compositions, some literary compositions at that, can be considered by each as their own. A moment of shared heritages. In fact, this diversity was present on every level, even on the level of scripts. Just one moment. Even on the level of scripts. For instance, Sanskrit as a language never had any Sanskrit script. Today we accord that status to what has been termed as Devanagari, but it is a relatively recent phenomenon. If you look at the old manuscripts composed in Sanskrit language all over India, we have Vandana among us, she can tell you better. If you look at those Sanskrit manuscripts, you will find that it is always written in the locally popular script. Nagari, Oriya, Gaudi, Sarada, whichever comes in handy. Many of the Sanskrit manuscripts written by the Goswamis of Vrindavan in the 16th century will attest to this fact. They are writing in Sanskrit as a language, but using the scripts they are comfortable with. And this is not only about the scripts. The Chaitanya Charitamrita is being translated into Brajbhasha, or Sanskrit commentaries of Chaitanya Charitamrita are being composed when the usual practice was the other way around, creating Bhasha commentaries for Sanskrit texts. But for Chaitanya Charitamrita, we are getting Sanskrit commentaries for a Bhasha text, a Bangla text. Now, Maithil Vidyapati is becoming essential part of other literary worlds. Chaitanya Dev is singing songs in Bangla, Sanskrit, and Oriya with equal ease on the eve of Ratha Yatra at Puri. I can go on giving hundreds of such examples, like when Rasul Upanishad in Sanskrit is being composed on Hazrat Muhammad, Nabiji. But I think my point has been adequately established already. And this is not only true, this pluralism is not only true about literary texts, about written texts. In fact, the term literature itself becomes inadequate and problematic in the Indian situation. The term Sahitya is more inclusive for that matter. Sahitya. Sahitya doesn't necessarily mean something written. It can be verbal, it can be spoken, it can be performative, anything. Literature etymologically means written words, but Sahitya can include Shruti and Lipi both, written texts as well as performative genres. This is important because in our culture, written and spoken were never mutually exclusive. From the very beginning, both existed in a continuum of knowledge transmissions, paramparas, complementing each other perhaps. Think about the parampara transmission. I was thrilled when I found that a Bijak of Kabir has been translated verbatim by Lalon Fakir in Bangla. Just imagine, both Kabir Das and Lalon Fakir were supposedly illiterates. They were separated by at least 3 centuries and hundreds of miles, and yet a verse of Kabir Das from Kashi find its way to a Lalan Fakir in interior Bengal. Sahitya can encompass all these knowledge systems and their transmissions with all the differences. This pluralism is not only limited to the ancient period or the medieval literary genres flourished during the Bhakti movement. If that was the case, then the emergence of modern genres like novel or short story, or literary movements like Romanticism or Realism or Dalit Sahitya in all Indian languages could not be explained. So there is a connection, a commonality. The interactions among literatures, cultures, people have never stopped. It is an ongoing and continuous process. But we should be careful enough not to look at this as influence or impact of one language culture on the other. That will lead us to major, minor, large, small, important, unimportant, these kind of hierarchies and also hegemonies. Instead, we can return to the concept of the valley between the self and the other. If I am not bent upon establishing my supremacy and superiority over others, only then I can understand the relationships that envelop me. In fact, the discipline of comparative literature was born as an attempt to counter such superiority complexes. The one language, one culture, one nation model of Europe created strives and led to 2 consecutive world wars. The catastrophe that followed created a crisis for the entire human civilization. Comparative literature was wished for as a way of engaging in dialogues transcending the boundaries of national literatures, parochial nationhoods, the hunger for more power and control over others. Comparative literature was conceived as a way to bridge the gaps that existed among cultures, among people. However, it should be mentioned that in the Indian context, the relation between national literature and comparative literature is not the same as in Europe. As we have already pointed, in the absence of any one singular Bharatiya language or Indian language, comparative literature becomes the way, the only way to arrive at the notion of Indian literature. To rephrase, whereas in Europe, comparative literature is thought to be the way of surpassing and negating national literatures, in India, comparative literature is an effective way to create national literature, to create Indian literature. Anyone can understand that just by adding all the literary canons in all the languages in India, we cannot get the concept of Indian literature. This cannot be an additive process. For that, we have to delve deeper. We have to look at the interactions and exchanges that are taking place among the language cultures continuously. That interliterary process is the site of comparative literature in India. And only by understanding that process, we can seek to know what is Indian literature. Being composed in Marathi, Gujarati, English, Tamil, Manipuri, Urdu, and so on, what makes one literary text Indian? That is the question. There is not much scope to deliberate upon finer questions like whether it should be termed as Indian literature in a singular or Indian literatures in the plural. But for the time being, let us just remember that we are practicing comparative literature knowingly or unknowingly whenever we are thinking about Indian literature, or for that matter, whenever we are thinking about our own literature, we are actually practicing comparative literature. We have inherited a rich and unique heritage of syncretic and pluralistic culture. And now it is upon us to preserve that, further that. This is not only true about literatures and cultures, comparative literature permeates our lives as well. Only by respecting the other, I can begin the journey to understand my own self. As Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore would say, this is a journey from the Choto Ami to the Boro Ami, from the little self to the greater self. I am standing at a station for a certain train to catch. Meanwhile, trains are coming from unknown places and going to destinations I am not so sure about. Trains with compartments full of texts, concepts, and cultures. They are affecting me in tangible and intangible ways. In fact, they are shaping me. They are making me, myself, in innumerable ways. Ultimately, maybe I catch my train, but is it the same me? Or has the waiting transformed me significantly? Maybe my destination itself has changed. In a way, this moment of waiting at the station, this transition, spans my entire life. We are continuously experiencing this flux of texts, concepts, ideas, and people. Comparative literature is a way of dealing with this flux of texts, concepts. It is about the valley in between the self and the other. It is about creating relationships and honest and respectful সংলাপ or discussion. Let me finish by quoting a couple of my favorite lines. This is from a letter by Rabindranath Tagore, a personal letter. I'm just quoting one sentence. The idea of India is against the intense consciousness of the separateness of one's own people from others, which inevitably leads to ceaseless conflicts. Thank you for bearing with me and my ramblings for so long. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. And I'm speechless because I really don't know that how can I gather myself to ask you any question, or I am not that much what I can say. Like, still, I am in a state of trance to what I can say, like, to absorb the intellectual discourses which you have presented to us. Uh, we I think all the participants, they liked, they enjoyed your lecture to a great extent. They are also in the same state of trance. That's why we don't have any question right now, but uh, I would like to say something like, though my knowledge is very limited or meager, but sir, as you are talking about cultural plurality, or the terms what you have used, plurilingualism and pluriculturalism. So, do you think, sir, when we are talking about of creating a national language, don't it sound political? And the second, a small question, maybe it sounds futile or meaningless, but the second question which I have, that then when we are talking about what I have understood about the plurality in the field of culture, then how can we situate Derrida in in this particular discourse in terms of deconstruction?
Okay, uh, these are, I think, incisive questions and very important ones too. Let me take one by one. As I understand, plurilingualism, how to sustain plurilingualism when we are talking about a national literature. So this idea of national is significantly different from the idea of nationalism in Europe. In Europe, in a catastrophe-ridden, war-devastated Europe, comparative literature was uh, envisaged as a way to transcend the nationalist parochial boundaries of single literature nations. So, to counter superiority complexes, counter power hungry people. So, it was trying to create sort of a dialogue, a conversation between different cultures. But in India, interestingly, I have tried to just raise the issue here. In India, we don't have a national literature as such. We cannot name any given language Indian without first creating a standard of Indianhood or Indianness. So, and you cannot call an additive process to be a national literature. You cannot add Bangla with Maithili, with Nepali, with Tamil, and then call the concoction Indian literature. We have to delve deeper and we have to think about commonalities, common structures of feeling, genres, texts, literary movements that kind of characterize the Indian literatures in general. So here, comparative literature is not denial of national literature. Comparative literature becomes the first step, the way to arrive at the idea of national literature, arrive at the idea of Indian literature as such. So I think that's for the first issue I have raised. The second question is so vast. I don't know whether to go into that territory of Derridian post-structuralism. Basically, there is a huge misconception about the term deconstruction because people often conflate it with destruction. Deconstruction is the opposite of that. Uh, Maybe it's very mundane, but I try to make my students understand this concept by an example. The way of looking at a construction a posteriori, that can be called the process of deconstruction. So how to understand a particular configuration, a construction? It may be literary, cultural, social, religious, anything. So the way you look at the process of construction, you close read it, you are practicing deconstruction. So we all are actually practicing deconstruction without even knowing it, without naming it so. Whenever we close read a poem or a play, we are deconstructing because we are looking at similes, metaphors, imageries, texts, words, sentences. So comparative literature is all about close reading. In that way, you can say that comparative literature actually looks at structures of feelings. Can we ascribe any structure? Maybe it's temporary, it's tentative, It's unsure, uncertain, but still, the structures of feelings, that is the goal, that is the motto of comparative literature. Is that anyway answering your
Yes,
issue?
sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
for
you
your
all.
talk. And
Thank
now we will be having the last session of day 3. So I would like to welcome Dr. Shantanu De. Dr. De, please accept our greetings and thank you be a part of this faculty development program. Dr. Shantanu De is the Associate Professor in the Department of History at Ramakrishna Mission Vidya Mandira, Belur Math, affiliated to University of Calcutta, Kolkata, India. And he is also the research fellow in the Bengali Vaishnavism in the Modern Period program at the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, Oxford University, United Kingdom. Dr. De is a recipient of the Charles Wallace India Trust Fellowship. His PhD dissertation from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India, explored the key issues and trends among Gaudiya Vaishnavas in colonial Bengal. He has researched and published a number of articles at uh, many journals of religious studies, highlighting the varied aspects of religion, and also in the other journals emphasizing on colonial modernity. So, sir, please take over the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Goswami. And it is my proud privilege that the Department of History, St. Xavier's College, has invited me to be a speaker in this online faculty development program. At the outset, I should like to point out that I have a confession to make about the topic which I have chosen today. Although I have done a couple of courses on this topic and some readings also, but I am not a practitioner of digital humanities in any way. And so most of what I shall be speaking today will be as a fellow participant rather than as an expert. So this is the proviso which I am giving out at the beginning. But the reason why I sought to engage myself with this topic is more important. It is nevertheless because I felt that such an important topic, which is so very important for the modern academia, should not be left unsaid in a very important FDP program like what you are having. So that was the reason why I chose this topic. Although my disciplinary emphasis is in history, but digital humanities is something which is far broader than what we can imagine. So this is what I wanted to point out at the outset. So in my talk, I would be basically deleting all the technical baggage that the term digital humanities usually brings with it. However, I would just like to point out that I would be dealing with the possibilities that the topic has to offer to us, and also to give you an idea about how this particular field has its own sort of limitations and own sort of creative avenues for all humanities scholars, not just historians. So with these words, may I just go on to my slide presentation. I would request Srimanti to kindly initiate the slides. So as I was saying, I would try to look in my presentation at the varied perceptions and definitions of the term digital humanities, the way in which this field has evolved, and some of the basic methods and tools it uses, along with a little bit of analysis of the interesting digital humanities projects being conducted so far, so that our participants may form an idea about the theme itself. And as you can see, the picture that I have provided is a little provocative, where books are being digitized, and visually that can be imagined at the same time. So as we all understand that research and teaching in the familiar world, from college or university classrooms to libraries and archives, everything had been centered around the printed text, which is books, articles, journals, and so on and so forth. So this is something which we have gotten used to. However, across the university and the colleges, the way in which we pursue research today is beginning to change gradually but surely towards digital technology. And indeed, it is becoming more and more evident that research is increasingly being mediated through digital technology. I hope all of you are aware that the COVID situation has, in fact, driven home this point that we as teachers or students or researchers, everybody has had to adapt to the technology that we have in our hands. So technological dependence and dependence on texts and dependence on ebooks, these are things which are here to stay in the academia. This is something which we have all understood, I think. So many people argue that this mediation is slowly beginning to also change what it means to undertake research, affecting both the epistemologies and the ontologies that underlie a research program. So with these words, I think we can move on. Now to the next slide, please. Terminology-wise and definition-wise, I think the term digital humanities is still quite fuzzy because, as you can understand and as you can see in the slide, there are various definitions which are given, various new ways in which this subject has been conceptualized. Digital humanities, as a very infant discipline, I think has its own teething problems. With every child we have seen, they have teething problems. So this discipline, which is new on the block, has also got its own set of teething problems. So people have been asking, is it just a flashy new coinage, a new terminology just to make sense of? Or does it have a separate methodological outlook? Or is it a combination of varied discipline-specific approaches through the use of technology? So these are some questions which are usually put up to the digital humanities scholars. Does it mean simply humanities on a digital platform like the internet? Is it some form of virtual knowledge or cyber scholarship? These are things which one has to contend with. So there is a deeper layer, however, of contestation and skepticism among traditional scholars of diverse humanities disciplines, from sociology to comparative literature to history and whatnot, who think that the digital humanities cannot contribute at all in a fruitful sense to their respective fields of inquiry. So this criticism is also something which is there. But you must understand that most of this skepticism has emerged from an unwillingness on the part of the traditional academics to move beyond established disciplinary patterns and methods of research. And this also emerges from an assumption that digital humanities involves too much dependence on technology. As I would like to quote one digital humanities scholar, David M. Berry, he states in his book, Understanding Digital Humanities, that computationally supported thinking doesn't have to be dehumanizing. Please understand that we have a point over here where we must not go about over-stressing the linkage between humanities and technology. No one is arguing for substituting one for the other, but to use both fruitfully in order to gain a better understanding of one's ideas and one's issues. So it is not a precondition that all digital humanities scholars must be able to know software technology, must be able to code, must be able to build softwares or programs on their own. This is not what it is supposed to do. To draw upon an analogy, this would be akin to assuming that all car drivers are also good mechanics, since they have spent so much time behind the wheel, which is obviously not the case. So it is not as if that digital humanities scholars need to be aware of everything regarding computers and computing technology in order to participate in the digital humanities. So this is something which I wanted to point out, and this has been also pointed out by many other scholars. Other critics even condemn the digital humanities as a clever marketing technique, whereby academic marketing is done in order to draw funds. And this tactical positioning of the digital humanities, the term itself, has been a fundraiser, a fund gatherer. So you must understand that this is something which has to be understood all across the globe. This is happening. Digital humanities is spreading to different parts and portions of the world, and I'll come to that later. So therefore, irrespective of such criticism that we have over the last 2 decades, the field of digital humanities has found wide acceptance. May we go on to the next slide, please. Digital humanities, as you understand, departs from the diametrically opposed social sciences versus the natural sciences divide. And it is in favor of a perspective whereby we have an integrated intellectual landscape, whereby technology and the humanities are not treated as binary opposites to each other, but as two sides of the same, necessarily interdependent and mutually constitutive set of intellectual practices. So as you can see, some of the definitions: humanities in dialogue with digital technologies, digital humanities is born of the encounter between traditional humanities and computational methods. And the point which is important over here, the last definition which has been given is very pithy, that what is meant by the digital humanities, this is not a question to be answered, but it is a question which is to be continually explored and refined. So the definitions are elastic, it is flexible, and these definitions are not static. So it can change, the methodologies can change, the definitions can change with time. Can we go to the next slide, please? Digital humanities are not completely new, nor did they emerge spontaneously. And if we trace the genealogy of this particular discipline, we'll see that while some trace the prehistory of the digital humanities in the urge to gather and collate information and organize knowledge in encyclopedias in the 17th and 18th centuries, as you know, in the Enlightenment and even in the pre-Enlightenment period, encyclopedists had tried to gather and collate information. So it is considered as a precursor to this trend of digital humanities, which also lays stress on collating of data. In the 20th century, we find Father Roberto Busa, who was an Italian Jesuit priest who pioneered the usage of computers for linguistic and literary analysis. And Dr. Abhishek Bose just stated about comparative literatures. So I would just take on that these disciplinary changes and the ways in which disciplines were constructed were also going hand in hand with technological support in the 20th century. And people like Father Roberto Busa were trying to do this particular thing. Between 1940s and 1970s, he planned and produced, with the help of Thomas J. Watson, who was the founder of IBM Computers, the Index Thomisticus. And this Index Thomisticus is a tool for performing text searches within the massive corpus of the 13th century Christian saint Thomas Aquinas's Latin works. So it was an enabling mechanism whereby people could search specific terms within the entire genre of works which were produced by St. Thomas Aquinas. So we find that the digital humanities themselves have had a rather interesting history. Originally, these were called in the second half of the 20th century as computing in the humanities or humanities computing. But from 1990s and early 2000s, the term which has come to stay with us is digital humanities. And as you find the definition which was given earlier, the Digital Humanities Manifesto, which was published in 2008, 2009, and the terminology is again very important. You have the term manifesto. Recall the Communist Manifesto in 1848. So the Digital Humanities Manifesto, which was drawn up by Jeffrey Schnapp and Todd Pressner, they pointed out certain characteristics of this particular type of discipline. And these were, as you can see in the slide, it aggregates practices from multiple fields. So it is interdisciplinary in approach in its very constitution, and it focuses on disseminated knowledge. So the output which is provided is to be distributed evenly across various types of media, whether the internet or otherwise. The second point which they emphasized was that it immerses quantitative and qualitative interpretative aspects together. So there is a certain snobbish idea within the traditional humanities that digital humanities is something which is done digitally, so which is quantitative only. But this is not the case. So it's digital as well as quantitative as well as qualitative. So the third point which they emphasized was about multi-vocality. And multi-vocality or multiple voices could be arranged together. They could be allowed to exist and coexist. This is something which the discipline tries to encourage. So sociologists and anthropologists could speak to each other and with other disciplinary experts on an even field in a digital humanities project. So the fourth point which they emphasize is on teamwork and collaborative production, reproduction of humanistic knowledge through collaboration and experimentation. So you have a very flexible approach which is now being brought to bear on this discipline. Can we go to the next slide, please? As you can understand that over the course of the last 2 decades, this discipline has emerged in its entirety. But also we must also emphasize that it is still evolving. So it is not something which has been ironed out, all its rough edges have been straightened. It is not so. So over the course of the last 2 decades, we find that we have a journal named the Digital Humanities Quarterly, which has come up, a Blackwell Companion to Digital Humanities in 2005. And we also have a governing body named the Alliance of Digital Humanities Organizations, which tries to look at different such institutions existing worldwide and bring them under an umbrella. So Alliance of Digital Humanities Organizations is also something which has come up, and in 2006, the Digital Humanities Initiative, which is a US initiative, is extremely important for understanding that this coordinates various aspects between the digital humanities disciplines in various universities. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as you can see, the several digital humanities centers and institutes have cropped up across the globe. This map is from around 2013-14, and as you can see, India doesn't feature in this map as a place where digital humanities centers have come up. But this scenario has changed later on, and I'll go to that. But you must understand that the global presence of digital humanities centers with postgraduate and PhD degrees being offered in the discipline has usually centered around the West. So US, Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, and to some extent China and Japan, these are the places where you have digital humanities departments cropping up in a major way. Next slide, please. However, from 2010 onwards, digital humanities has also begun making its presence felt in India, and the postgraduate diploma courses have begun in certain areas. For example, the School of Cultural Texts and Records and the Department of English at Raghabpur University has begun diploma courses. We have Presidency University also taking up courses of this nature. The Center for Studies in Social Sciences has a collaboration with Savifa, which is a part of the University of Heidelberg project, which has developed a database of Bengali vernacular journals for use by researchers. The Center for Digital Humanities at Pune is also something which has come up. From 2015 onwards, we find that digital humanities courses have flourished even further. For example, the Indian Institute of Technologies at Delhi, Indore, and Gandhinagar have begun conducting digital humanities programs. And most recently in 2019, we find IIT Jodhpur has established an interdisciplinary research platform on digital humanities on various themes, pointed themes like digital culture, digital heritage, digital economy, and whatnot. And along with this, we must also remember that the UGC, which is the funding body in India, it has initiated the STRIDE, STRIDE, which is the Scheme for Transdisciplinary Research for India's Developing Economy in 2019, which includes digital humanities as a thrust area for funding. So with these, I'll go on to the next slide, please. So the source materials for digital humanities, as you can understand, vary quite a bit. And as museums, libraries, archives, and other institutions all across the world have begun to digitize their collections and artifacts, new tools and standards have been developed that turn these materials into machine-readable data. So optical character recognition, or OCR, and text encoding initiatives, or TEI, are things which are increasingly becoming commonplace. So there is a distinction, however, which is to be made over here. You have born digital data, which is data which is born in a digital format, and there are texts or other aspects which are digitized. So these are the two aspects which are important for this kind of textual material. But you must also understand that textual data is only one part. There is also sound, images, videos, and various other types of digital data which can be and have been utilized by digital humanities scholars. Next slide, please. It is very difficult to delineate clearly what is new for methodology in digital humanities. The traditional research methods that we all know of in the individual disciplines that we come from, be it sociology, anthropology, or history, these are still important, and these apply with the same rigor in digital humanities also. But what is important is that they are more influenced by the new technologies that are available today. So digital humanities is not as if it offers a substitute. It is something which is adding on, which is providing new methods, new arenas for research by the humanities scholars. So digital humanities in this sense is basically more a convergence of different practices rather than a unified field. So as you can understand that there are various types of tools and various types of methods which are used. I will not go into the technicalities as I pointed out in the beginning, but let me just point out to some. Textual analysis tools are one aspect which are used by digital humanities scholars. And text mining, such words, text mining includes a number of applications, from tracking textual reuse and the fluctuation of certain words or themes over time to stylometry. This is a specific scientific word. Stylometry means that statistical analysis of variations in literary style between one writer or genre and another can be done through this format. So this is one aspect of textual analysis. The other aspect of textual analysis is the use of modeling of literary forms. These texts might represent a single author's collection, a periodical's full print run, or a collection of texts from different centuries. So we can compare over vast distances, over vast arenas of temporal time zones as well. So we can do different things with the technological data that is available with us. Important to any text analysis project is the curation of a data set, which often entails digitization and optical character recognition, which I just pointed out a little while ago. This optical character recognition technology is a process which turns words from images into searchable text. So you can imagine if you scan a page and then do an OCR on it, then the language in which it is written can become a searchable text in word format. So this is a technology which has immense possibilities. And as you can understand, that textual analysis tools are used in various fields today by different discipline experts. For example, in the fields of language and literary studies, in translation studies, in culture and religious studies, in history, as well as philosophy. The second mode of tools are visual analysis tools, which consist of using computational processes to study large amounts of data regarding images. The third type of tools are spatial analysis tools, and this involves different things from mapping roots and characters to using 360-degree photography and 3D in augmented reality and virtual reality landscapes. And there are various softwares available today. Many of them are, by the way, free softwares like Umeka, like Neatline, etc., which enables such spatial analysis to happen. And the fourth method is network analysis, which I will not be going into in detail, because I want to stress upon the different types of projects which are happening across the digital humanities field in order to give you a feel about how interesting and how diverse such projects can be made. To the next slide, please. So this particular project which you are seeing on your screen, this is the China Biographical Database project, which was done at Harvard University. It is a freely accessible relational database with biographical information about almost 471,000 individuals as of November 2020, and it is growing. Mind you, I've already provided you the link also so that you can visit the site yourself in order to have a feel of what it looks like and what kinds of data have been generated by the scholars. So from the 7th to the 19th century, you imagine a 12th century time span, and within these 12 centuries, the people, the places, the information from China has been digitized in this particular China Biographical Database, which was this particular huge project was done by various scholars, and obviously the person who took the initiative was a person by the name of Robert M. Hartwell and Michael Fuller, who went on to initiate this project. And this is an evolving site with regular updating of the database that enables a user to look at a variety of things. You can look at people, you can look at kingship, you can look at lineages of different dynasties and people who came from what place, their village names, their postings, if they were elected as officials in the Chinese bureaucracy in the 7th or the 10th or the 14th century. So this is something which is a huge database which offers and holds promise for historians and sociologists. And the data has been culled from the governmental archives and various other documents which exist in Chinese. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is another project which has been done in Australia. The Real Face of White Australia is a project which was developed by Kate Bignell and Tim Sherratt from the resources of the Australian National Archives. And in the early 20th century, Australia defined itself as a white man's country, despite the fact that it was home to indigenous Australians or aboriginals, apart from thousands of non-Europeans, including Chinese, Japanese, Indians, and other nationalities. However, this particular project has been titled Invisible Australians because the men, women, and children who, because of their color of their skin, with their homelands of their forebears being different, they found themselves at odds with the nation's claim to be white. So they faced discriminatory laws and policies such as the Immigration Restriction Act of 1901, which racially excluded and denied them their place as Australians. So this experimental browser, which has been created, enables one to explore the records of the White Australia policy through the faces of those people. And I've given the link over here as well. You can visit it and look for yourself how you can click on a portrait of any particular person, and the document from which it came from will become visible to you. You will also be able to follow a link to explore the context of the document in the National Archives of Australia's database. So this is an example of an interdisciplinary digital humanities project which integrates race studies, migration studies with colonial history at the same time. So these are some of the experimental projects which have been done in a very fruitful manner. Can we not aspire to have a similar digital humanities project where almost 74,000 Indian soldiers who gave up their lives for the British Empire in the First World War, whose lives lie scattered in archival records, in memoirs, in letters, photos, and oral memories of their descendants in one place? We can obviously do something like that, only the initiative has to be there. So to the next slide, please. This particular slide takes you to another project which is titled Authorial London, the city in the lives and works of its writers. And this would be interesting for literary scholars and literature people, the participants who are from these disciplines. Developed by Stanford University Libraries Center for Interdisciplinary Digital Research, this project provides a map guide to different places of London City as it appeared in the almost 193 works and biographies of almost 47 authors, from Chaucer and Coleridge to Rudyard Kipling and Graham Greene in the 20th century. So from the 14th to the 20th century, all who have lived in London, all who have spoken about different areas of London have been mapped in this particular digital humanities project. So this project offers the overlaying function. Overlaying function means that users can look at historic maps of the city of London for comparison. So you can also imagine how the city was growing, how new suburbs were being added on. And if you visit the site, as I provided the link, that would give you an idea of how this particular project can be fruitfully organized. The project aims to enhance the knowledge of place, especially select neighborhoods and particular places within them, to see who wrote about them, when was it written about, and how place conceptions have evolved in the literary imagination over time. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is another project which is titled America's Public Bible, very provocatively titled. This is a text analysis project which was launched by Professor Lincoln Mullen from the George Mason University, USA. America's Public Bible uncovers the presence of biblical quotations in almost 11 million newspaper pages in the Library of Congress's Chronicling America collection. So you can imagine the physical labor which would have taken such a project to be conducted by an individual scholar would have been unthinkable. But this project has been enabled by text mining purposes and facilities and tools, which has enabled this particular project to be completed. So using the techniques of machine learning, this particular project identified over 8.5 lakh quotations of the Bible or verbal allusions to specific Bible verses in those newspaper pages. What does it offer to us? This site offers to us a way to explore the trends of how frequently a biblical verse was used, with links to each quotation highlighted in the pages of Chronicling America. So by looking at the uses of the Bible in newspapers, we can understand and see which parts of the Bible were gaining currency among Americans, as well as the range of interpretations that were given to those verses. This automated text mining project reveals trends that would be inaccessible to a single scholar's reading of these documents, and yet it enables a close reading, as Professor Bose was just referring to. A close reading is also made possible by this text mining process. So we can have a historical context to these verses which were happening in different pages of different newspapers in America. To the next slide, please. And we have Stanford University, in fact, has a large array of projects. I would request all of you to kindly visit the sites, the links of which have been given. So mapping Ottoman Epirus is also another project, which is a historical project. For example, it tries to, this has been developed by two people, one from Istanbul University and the other from Stanford University, who draw upon multilingual archival sources from the Ottoman period, which are contained in the Athens archive, the Ottoman archives, and in different archives spread across the world. And it tries to spatially and quantitatively analyze the region of Epirus. Now, we may not be familiar with the area of Epirus. Epirus is a place which is located in western Greece and southern Albania. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, this particular area was undergoing massive change when it came within the fold of the Ottoman Empire. So this is being looked at by these two scholars as an exemplary microcosm of the Ottoman Empire. It creates a number of digital maps based on geographic information systems and textual analysis, and visualizes spatial relations of economic, political, and infrastructural transformations. So I think I'm exceeding the time which has been allotted to me, but I'll just quickly move on to the other slides that I have. Can we go to the next slide, please?
No, sir, it's absolutely fine. You can continue. All of us are, enjoying your lecture and coming to know about a lot of things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So if we move on to the next slide, as you can see, the Chinese Railroad Workers Project in North America, this has also been done by Stanford University, and it was conducted under the lead of Professor Gordon Chang and Shelley Fishkin. These two scholars, along with the help of hundreds of other scholars, students, and volunteers from around the world, they tried to recover the little-known contributions of Chinese railroad workers in constructing railroads in the US and entire North America between 1864 and 1869. So within these 5 years, the places where they went, the number of people who went, the descendants of these people who are presently living in China, they have been interviewed, and all this data has been collated. So oral histories, interviews, digital visualization, publications, and resources for teachers are the numerous things which have been developed by this project. And this is something which is also giving us an idea about the innovative ways in which technology can be used to construct a project of this nature. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So the possibilities are immense. So as you can imagine, yesterday we were hearing from a certain scholar about the Indus Valley civilization. And one must understand that digital humanities has immense possibilities even for a discipline like archaeology. And as you can understand that the modern tools and technologies which are available today, which includes satellite imagery, digital elevation rendering, sonar for underwater imaging, and ground penetrating radar, these combined visualization techniques offer us immense possibilities for conducting research, of looking at things, how regions changed, and how regions could be understood in a manner which is more fruitful for us. So if we just try to go back to the presentation which was made yesterday, we can have a digital humanities project on the Indus Valley civilization, which plots not only the different areas which were important for this particular civilization, but also digitize the artifacts, for example, lapis lazuli, for example, the trading links, and we could have an imaged version, a 3D imaging of various structures in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and so on and so forth. So these are things which hold possibilities for researchers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So now we come to the hazy areas. So as you can understand that with every discipline, digital humanities also is a discipline which has. So, however, one must understand that the public discourse on digital humanities as a field is as much open to ideological currents and subjective preferences as conventional research. As you can understand, if a sociologist or a historian was to do research, he could have adopted any of the various methodologies which are available. One could adopt Marxist analysis techniques or other techniques. So such techniques are also available to the digital humanities scholars. And you must also understand that questions of underrepresentation of gender, of race, of sexuality, of class, caste, community issues, and the north-south divide between the west and the east and the north and the south have been gray areas in this particular field. So, for instance, we find that most of the projects that have been done till now are mostly in the US, the UK, Europe, and Australia. So the global south or Africa has more or less been almost neglected in this particular field. Secondly, there are also serious challenges and debates among practitioners regarding digital humanities pedagogy as well. For instance, how should digital humanities be taught best? How can we judge, evaluate, peer review a digital humanities project? When collective and collaborative web-based projects are involved, how can we give credence to individuals who have participated in such a project? So these are issues which are still hazy. These are still evolving. The third point is there is a further critique that is slapped on digital humanities. It is considered that digital humanities, with its overt dependence on technology, works to create a new form of privileged elite scholarship, which is actually trying to create a new divide, which remains out of bounds for most technologically challenged people. So it is, again, something which the digital humanities has to grapple with. The fourth point of criticism is that startup costs for digital humanities are so high in terms of infrastructure, inputs, pay for researchers, computer programmers, computer technology software, digitization costs, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine that it is cash intensive, which is not affordable by countries or by nations which do not have funds to spare. So digital humanities is something which is, again, elitist in nature. But there are also questions about sustainability of digital projects. For example, the question comes up time and again, who will pay to maintain the digital resources in the future? Can we afford to do so? So these are things which need to be addressed by digital humanities scholars. The fifth and the last point, which is debated over here, is the ethical angle. So shouldn't research which is done in a digital format be available freely? But is it available for free? No, it is not. So digitally available resources also has its costs. So anybody and everybody cannot access it to the full extent. So issues of privacy, issues of copyright, issues of plagiarism, all of these are again important over here. So maybe just come to a conclusion. The next slide, please. So the pointers, I'm not saying conclusion because these are pointers. We have two perspectives in our minds. It has to be recognized that the field of digital humanities is still in an experimental ferment, and it remains to be seen in the future what holds for it, what the future holds for it. So there are optimists who consider that it is the future of research in the humanities. So all humanities research will now probably veer around towards digital humanities This is the optimistic standpoint. And there is also a pessimistic standpoint who consider that digital humanities is more like a bubble which is going to burst sometime soon. So this is something which is for the future to foretell for us. And I would like to conclude over here. The next slide, please. I have given some digital resources, web resources. If you want to go to these resources, you can have an idea of how this particular field has been growing up. And I'll leave you over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation on digital humanities. And yes, we are all referring the sources from digital humanities. Even we can show those references to our students. And I think, sir, you have one question. So with your permission, shall I read it for you?
Sure, sure.
Okay. So just a second, sir. I think it's rather an observation. It's from S. Janaki. Good evening, sir. Digital is taking us to new world. But if you take primary data collection analyzing, the new concept, direct contact is best than this. This is only supporting tool. Please clarify.
Yes, I am in complete agreement with you, as Janaki. It is, as I stated in the outset also, that this is not a particular field which is going to substitute research which is done conventionally. So we are not speaking about substituting one form of research, one methodology of research with another methodology. I think what I'm trying to argue, I was trying to argue for the last 40 minutes or so, was basically to look at how digital humanities can help us expand our frontiers rather than hedge our frontiers. So it is not that the disciplines that you come from, be it sociology, anthropology, or political science or whatnot, I think the type of methodologies that you have can be used, but these can be used in a more fruitful, exponential manner if we use other types of technologies that are available today. For example, we heard about data sets in the first day, right? So if I'm not mistaken, either on the first day or the second day, we had heard about that. So data sets can also be, and questionnaires can also be circulated online, which can also generate a lot of data cutting across digital divides. For example, you may be sitting in, I think, South India, and we are interacting together. This medium, this format, and the tools which it affords us can obviously expand our frontiers rather than hedge it.
Thank you, sir. And there is one more question, I guess, from Balaknath Bhattacharya. Sir, can this be stated that DH is an application of information technology in every area of social science to generate useful information in a vast scale?
Yes, I think you have got it right. And this is mind you, as I pointed out, there are two types of data. One which is digitized and one which is born digital. For instance, may I point out something? We are using the internet very frequently for the last 20 years or so. But can you imagine after, say, for example, another 10 years or 15 years, when we sit down and reflect and retrospectively try to analyze how the digital media has evolved over the last 30, 40 years, would we be able to do that unless we use born digital data? So born digital data is also something which needs to be given credence. It is something which warrants our attention at the same time, like any other type of data. So I think this is the best that I could say to your query. Yeah.
Sir, I have one query. Sir, can we promote or propagate the practice of digital humanities in vernacular so that it will be accessible by more people, because as we teach the rural students, I can share from my experience, they are not always in a position to access those data in digital humanities which are written in English. So
Right.
as we are doing more experiments in the field of IT sector, so can we do something in that particular regard so that we can encourage, or we can involve more people in this what I can say, like in this movement? Because what you have stated, like through your presentation, what we have understood, that digital humanities, it is creating, or it is in the way of creating a movement by which the scenario for academic exchanges might be changed in future.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And what I stated was not as if that only French or only Chinese or only English can be done. It can be also plastically, in fact, elastically, it can be extended to the vernaculars also. And as you know, in Bangladesh and in other parts of the world, in India also, we have many digital softwares which try to use OCR, optical character recognition technology, for reading texts which are written in Bangla, or for that matter, Marathi or any of the South Indian languages. So it can be fruitfully used. And can you imagine if we were able to scan and OCR all the data which is available for example, from the religious scriptures, we would have been able to do data searches of different scriptures at the same time, like Father Roberto Busa's attempts for the Latin corpus of St. Thomas Aquinas. So this is something which has potential, and it requires a lot of funding, obviously, and there is the good intention also, which needs to be given out by scholars like you and me. And I think we need to go ahead full steam in this field. So I think it has immense possibilities. If there are no questions, I think we can now wind up. Thank you.
Sir, one more clarification or query from my end, if I'm not wasting your valuable time. Sir, don't you think like our passion, or like as our dependence on digital humanities somehow is depriving us for reading the books, or like the primary sources?
Yes, definitely. I agree with you again. But then at one point of time, when the transition from manuscripts to books was done, even the writers of manuscripts felt the same, that our livelihoods are at stake. So publishers are also thinking in the same fashion now. But ask the authors who are publishing in dual formats now. The ebooks are giving them more money than I think the print formats. So I think this is something which it has an economic angle to it, and so it is something which will obviously come. Society and economy will force you into new arenas which you may not have initially wanted to explore. So thank you.
So much,
Thank you.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And we have one question for Dr. Abhishek Bose. So, sir, are you there? If are you there, then we can take up the question, please. Dr. Abhishek Bose, are you there? Dr. Abhishek Bose, are you there? Okay. So before going to end the sessions for day 3, so as all of you experienced, like we faced some technical glitches, so that's why we missed some portions of a very important lecture which was going on that time by Dr. Vandana Mukherjee. So ma'am is here. Ma'am, are you here? So Dr. Mukherjee, are you here? Dr. Vandana Mukherjee. So, as being the organizers, we are having a plan that we will be allotting 10 minutes to ma'am so that she can conclude. Hope it's fine for the participants, because that time we had to stop and we had to go to the other lecture, so it was not that much like we did justice and to our distinguished speaker and how she was explaining the things. That it was really brilliant. And I request Dr. Vandana Mukherjee. Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, are you there?
Yes, am I audible, Tinni?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much.
Yeah, thank
So,
you.
ma'am, you are audible, and
Only 10 minutes or 5 minutes I shall try to complete.
you can
Thank
also
you.
take 10 minutes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
No issues.
No
Please
problem.
continue.
I
Thank
think,
you.
what is my point? I'm just telling that of the 17 points of manuscripts, which the manuscript reader have to do for the research methodology, they have to know everything. And after that, just on the last point, I told the colophon portion of the manuscript, which is very important. I'm also thinking whether you can listen or not, because that time was a very problem. Anyway, the colophon. Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
ma'am, you are audible. You are
Okay.
audible, ma'am.
Okay,
Please
okay.
continue.
Because I'm quite shaky.
No,
So,
no, ma'am.
I think some of you can understand that what I like to say, that what is the process of reading a manuscript. How could you read the punctuation? How could you read the manuscript? But from each and every step, it appears that as the manuscript writers, the authors of the manuscript wrote with great perseverance and patience their manuscript, which they have mentioned. I am quoting that portion. Very popular quotation you can find at the end of every manuscript, that ভগ্নপৃষ্ঠ কোটি গ্রীব স্তব্ধ দৃষ্টি রধ মুখম কষ্টেন লিখিতম চৈত যত্নেন পরিপালয়ে রক্ষণীয়ং প্রযত্নেন যস্মাৎ কষ্টেন লিখ্যতে কষ্টেন লিখিতং চ মাম পুত্রবৎ পরিপালয়ত. That means I have written with so much care and bearing with so much pains by this manuscript, with my neck, shoulder, back, and waist bent down, keeping eyes concentrated on only one thing only, unquote. So save me from the water and life. Protect me with care as you do for your child. So this is the request for all the authors of the manuscript to keep the manuscript as like your son. This is the last portion of the manuscript we can see in maximum manuscript. And for these things, the colophon portion of the manuscript is very important. For the manuscript reader and the manuscript cataloger and the manuscript editor have to go through that colophon portion, from where you can find that not only his manuscript, the subject, but also the socio-political history of that time, because we have find some manuscripts where the writers or the scribes, anyone maybe, they have written their own daily expenses, their experience, why they wrote, who has sponsored the manuscripts, everything. So historically it is very important. And finally, in each and every manuscript, it is very interesting, the date is mentioned. This date is either by the scribes or by the authors, whatever it may be, but they have never mentioned during that period also, as we also mentioned after writing something, the date, but they put out the date with a date code. I'm reading one code. It is very interesting and good also. Read this. You see, no? Shoshi Boshu Rito Chandre Shake. This is the date of a manuscript. One manuscript on Kabya text. So how can you understand what is date? It is the date. You see, Shake means Shokabdo, because most of the manuscripts are given date by Shokabdo or Bikram Sangbat or Newar Sangbat or Bengali Shon also. So there is a system of transforming these Shokabdo or Bengali Shon or any Shokabdo to modern Christian era. So what my point is here, that a Shoshi, what does that mean? Shoshi means the moon, that means one. Then Boshu, Boshu means Ashtoboshu, 8. Then Rito means the season. There are 6 seasons. And then comes the Chandra, again 1. So what is the date? 1861. But it should be counted just reversely, from right to left. How can it? Then it will be 1681 Shokabdo. So this is also another techniques of decoding the date of manuscript. The manuscript reader should be careful in reading the date of manuscript in that way. And finally, the illustrated manuscript. Illustrated manuscript is a very important manuscript. Mainly in the Persian manuscript, we can find very good illustration. Other than Persian manuscript, also in the Bengali and the Sanskrit manuscript also have the illustration. But in ancient India, the illustrations are done by the original vegetable dye color. And also in our institute, we have the Parshanama, the Aini Akbari, and other manuscripts with golden leaf and painted with original lapis lazuli, the original vegetable dye color. So for all these things, what we need, that is the preservation and conservation of the manuscript of my lecture. Conservation, what is that conservation? There are two types of preservation and conservation. One is curative conservation, another is preventive conservation. First, we have to take the preventive conservation. One main enemy of any manuscripts or the archival documents or the old thing is dust. And the second one is moisture. So we have to keep the manuscript free from dust and moisture. So every 15 days, we have to dust the folios of the manuscript with soft feather brush. And dusting, cleaning, and encasing them with the acid-free paper. I told you, whenever we open the manuscript, we can see the manuscripts are wrapped with a piece of paper and cloth. The cloth should be starch-free and the paper should be acid-free paper, which will safeguard the manuscript. These are the preventive conservation measures. And what is the curative conservation? Curative conservation means the lamination, encapsulation, and the deacidification, and finally the digitization. As just now we heard about the digital humanities, the course was very good lecture of Dr. Shantanu Dey. I'm impressed and I've been moved even. Anyway, for the digitization of the manuscript also, we need this process of cataloging. And why the digitization is necessary? If we give the manuscripts to the hand of the scholars, it may destroy by his hand by exposure. So everything, the digital copy is necessary. And before doing this digital copy, you have to make properly catalog the manuscripts and keep before that hand list where the manuscript reader or researcher can understand what is that manuscript, because sometimes some folios are missing. So if I go through that, the title, what I told about the 17 points given in the hand list or the descriptive catalog, then I can understand, oh, these pages are missing, so I will never get it. So this information should be provided in the manuscript by the manuscript scholar and the manuscript cataloger whenever he is identifying and deciphering the manuscripts and keeping in cataloging form. Now I'm coming the last portion of the manuscript, that is the Pustako Beparo. I told there are two subjects. One is Lekhok Karma, that is the writing manuscript, and the other is the Pustako Beparo, that is the editing of the manuscript. Editing of the manuscript is the main object of manuscriptology. Why we read manuscript, why we like to get the history of our culture, history of any culture, we need the help of manuscript. But I told there are several editions of same manuscript, we can get a lot. Suppose I am taking the example of Ashtoshastika Pragyaparamita. We have in our institute, we have in the Calcutta University, we have in the Delhi University. Then how it is possible? Is it the same Ashtoshastika Pragyaparamita? In fact, it is the same. But as during that period, whenever there were no Xerox machine or anything printing, so the authors himself made several copies, and sometimes he kept one scribes or the copyist, paid copies. This is also posted during that period. They copied the manuscript. And whenever they copied, sometimes they obviously made some mistake due to the unmindfulness, or sometimes they themselves insert some lines, or they corrected some wrong spelling or anything else, or sometimes they inserted their views, whatever they thought the author might have missed it. In that way, the original manuscript loses its own originality. Another thing is that the original manuscript is called author's copy, and all the copies are called exemplar copy. And this exemplar copy should be edited. So whenever one is going to edit a manuscript, he or she have to try to collect at least all the editions of manuscript, and then he will make a collation sheet. And with this manuscript, the collation sheet, he will take one manuscript as a mother manuscript, I mean the oldest one. Then he will compare all the manuscripts of the same text, each one after another, and put A, B, C, D, E, and in that way, he will compare all the manuscripts. And if there is any printed version, he may also consult that portion also, because it may be printed quite few days, quite years before. So there might have something new. So he will put on his own pages all these points, and whatever difference, he will show it on at the back on the footnote portion. And that is the process of editing manuscript. So then the object of manuscriptology will be over. So this much I like to tell you, that present day it is necessary to critically edit all the manuscripts, so that not only in our country, throughout the world, especially the Japan and China is trying to consult the manuscript and edit the manuscripts, so that the ancient culture will be visual to all people. This much. Thank you. I think I can try and to understand you what I like to tell. And if you have any question, then you can ask. Thank you. Thank you all for giving me this time.
Thank you so much. It's our privilege to hear you, and I can remember the days at the Asiatic Society when I worked under your blessed guidance.
Yes.
So we have one question for you. It's from Bijo Joseph. His question is, why the earliest script in India is called as Brahmi script?
Yeah. Brahmi script, it is called the Brahma Bhasha Shatu Bharati Bhasha. We believe that the Brahma is the creator of the world. So in our faith, in the Hindu goddess faith, so it is called, as it is by the Brahmi, from the mouth of Brahma, it is called the Brahmi script, is named in that way. Now I am telling it, we call Brahmi is the mother, Brahmi to Bharatu Bhasha. So it is the language and script of India. Is it okay? I think.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry, we had to go
it's
to
also
the
my
other station. And it's not like your fault also. Sometimes we have to depend on the technicalities or the technical things, or we have to face some technical issues. So thank
Internet
you.
Issue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have one question for Dr. Abhishek Bose. Sir, are you there?
Yes, I am very much here.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, I couldn't respond to it at that point. Basically, this is a loaded question. I can see from the chat,
Yes, sir.
Professor Bhattacharya's question.
Yes, sir.
Whether
whether globalization and, sir, shall I read it for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Whether globalization and entrance of technology in every nook and corner of the society is not dampening the spirit of multiculturalism, as you said, plurality. This is the first question, I guess. And the second question is, how plurality of culture will be protected from the aggression of stronger monoculture through technology?
I think in continuation of Professor Day's wonderful talk, we can somehow think about technology in a different way. See, what is a pen? Or when you are writing a manuscript, you are using the ink and an indigenous kind of pen, which was prevalent at that point. That was the best technology available at that point. So if we think about computers and internet and so on, all these are nothing but the development or evolution of that ancient pen. We are trying to write, we are trying to communicate through these technologies. Now, these technologies can be used for good reasons and for not so good reasons, of course. But if you think of technology as a stumbling block, then you won't be able to communicate your thoughts, your concepts and ideas and poems and plays to anyone from the very beginning. So technology is not our enemy. Our enemy is the hand behind the pen which is operating it. If it's moving with not so good intent, then it becomes our enemy. And talking about the onslaught of globalization, globalization is not a recent phenomenon either. If you think about, say, Bengal, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, one of the pioneers of Bengali Renaissance, quote unquote. So when Ram Mohan Rai was being kind of getting familiar with the English education system, with the British knowledge systems, then he recognized that he had already read about Socrates and Plato. From which source? He read it from the Persian sources. Plato is called Aflatun in the Persian. So how globalization affects us, that's also a point of contention. And how do we negotiate with globalization? Globalization was always there. The concepts actually traveled, it can be shown, the concepts actually traveled via trade routes. If you take the issue of Bible translation from Amharic to Hebrew to Greek, Latin, Arabic, and back to Europe, and then it spread all over the world. So multiculturalism was always there. The point is, the doable is, how do we negotiate with it? How do we be respectful to others? How do we be honest about our relationships, the network of relationships that envelop us, and also how not to hierarchize the languages, literatures, cultures, and the people who own those cultures. That's, I think, kind of my response. It's not actually an answer, it's a response.
Thank you so much. Hope Dr. Bhattacharya, who has raised this question, he got the clarifications. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Dr. Shormishta De Basu, the Secretary, Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, to give the vote of thanks. Dr. Shormishta De Basu, please.
Namaskar. Namaskar. It is my privilege to offer the vote of thanks on behalf of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. Firstly, I want to thank Department of History, St. Xavier's College, Autonomous, Kolkata, Raghabpur campus, and IQAC St. Xavier's College, the organizer of this event, Research Methods in Social Sciences with focus on cultural studies. The collaborators, Bhaktivedanta Research Center, Kolkata, Sri Jagannath Research Center, St. Paul's Cathedral Mission College, Kolkata, and the Department of Ethnology, History of Religions and Gender Studies, Stockhome University. Thank you all the resource persons for your erudite and informative presentation on different aspects of exploring humanities and social sciences through the lens of innovative approaches. Thank you, Dr. Rajarshi Chakraborty, Dr. Vandana Mukherjee, Dr. Abhishek Bose, and Dr. Shantanu De. Thank you, Dr. Tinmi Goswami, for conducting the session successfully. And last but not the least, thank you all the participants for joining us successfully. Now I just say about something about the Kolkata Society. Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, KSAS, was founded in the year 2012-13 with a view to explore the possibilities of the societal development of the Asian countries with special reference to India. The organization views the developmental activities of the Asian communities and societies by concentrating on different disciplines of social sciences like archaeology, anthropology, comparative literature, cultural studies, education, folklore and culture, gender studies, history, international relations, linguistics, museology, sociology, and others. Chinese studies in relations to Indology is viewed empathetically. The research programs of the society will integrally serve the interest of the nation in particular and of the humanity at large. The aims and objectives of the society to carry out research programs for planning and social welfare, to develop and promote activities like lectures, discussions, seminars, field visits, film show, and cultural programs for the dissemination of knowledge, to undertake field investigations in the areas of archaeology, anthropology, folklore and culture, gender studies, linguistics, etc., for understanding the social issues of the grassroots level, to promote and encourage advancement in literary, cultural, historical, and methodical education throughout India and abroad, to explore the possibilities in the field of Indology, Sinology, Southeast Asian studies in order to strengthen the bilateral relations with the neighboring countries of India, to remain in touch with other similar associations or societies in other parts of India and abroad for exchange of views, to collaborate with the disciplines like computer science and information technology to enhance the applied area of the whole developmental program. We organize seminars, conferences, memorial lectures, special lectures, and publish its proceedings and papers for future correspondence and to keep record. We organize annual workshop with greater focus on methods in research, report writing, research paper writing. We can affiliate major and minor research projects of any government or non-government research organization. We have a small library with books, journals, and periodicals. We publish regularly an international bilingual journal with ISSN number, and it is enlisted in UGC care list. At the end of month December 2020, we shall publish the volume 6, number 2 of the Journal of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. We have published different edited volumes in collaboration with different publishers such as Gangchil, Shetu Publication, Sharada Publications, etc. These books are based on different lectures, seminars, and conferences organized by KSAS. In the pandemic period, we have organized our scheduled Suniti Kumar Chatterjee Memorial Lecture and one workshop on survival constraints on folk art and artisans in COVID-19 pandemic. We are really happy to academically collaborate with the organizers and hope the participants are benefited a lot with the erudite lecture of our eminent resource persons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Debashu. And I would also like to thank M.H. Srimanti Ghoshal, Research Fellow, Bhaktivedanta Research Center, for conducting the first two sessions. And all things went well. So now we are ending our sessions for day 3. And